Hey guys, today we begin with a story that doesn't roar at you, but walks in slowly, heavy, sun-warmed, and quiet. It's the story of Heracles. Not the shouting, fighting Heracles you might remember from the old tales, but the one who moved through silence, through dust, through slow dawns and long shadows. Tonight, we'll follow his 12 labors not as battles, but as moments of breath and waiting. From the dark mouth of a lion's cave to the still garden of golden apples to the quiet banks of the underworld, we'll walk beside him. Step by step, no rush. Just the soft weight of time, the rhythm of his breath, and the world shifting slowly around him. Let the fire crackle, let the night settle, and let this old myth unfold, not in noise, but in calm. Before you settle in and get comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. In the comments, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see our sleepy little myth-loving community stretch across the world. And if there's a particular myth, legend, or story you'd love to hear next, share it below. I'm always listening. Now, dim the lights, let your thoughts slow down, and let's drift gently into tonight's story. There was no celebration, no applause, no music in the halls that morning. The stone corridors of Tiryns carried only the soft rhythm of footsteps and the faint rustling of linen robes. It was still early. The sky outside had not yet decided whether it would stay blue or let in the pale haze of clouds, and Heracles stood in the courtyard, quietly listening to the silence. He did not argue with the order. He did not ask why. He only bowed his head when Eurystheus gave him the first task to slay the lion of Nemea, the one whose golden hide no weapon could pierce, the one that had devoured travelers and soldiers alike, the one whose roar was said to shake the hills, though those who heard it closely never returned to describe it. Heracles left the palace without ceremony. No trumpets, no companions, no chariot. Just a cloak, thick and rough, draped over one shoulder, a club carved from an old olive tree, and his breath steady and unhurried. The road to Nemea was long, but not difficult. He walked through olive groves, where the silver-green leaves whispered above him. He passed fig trees, their branches still heavy from the harvest. He crossed dry riverbeds, where white stones warmed slowly in the morning sun, and each time the wind blew gently through the grass, it sounded like someone breathing, as if the land itself was alive. Watching, waiting. He stopped only when hunger asked him to, and when he did, he found flat rocks by the side of the path and ate simple food, coarse bread wrapped in cloth, a handful of olives, a piece of soft goat cheese, the kind of meal that didn't distract from thought, that let the mind drift. And his thoughts drifted often. What kind of beast was this lion? How had it grown so strong? What made its hide so thick that blades bounced like raindrops? Some said it was a child of the moon. Others whispered it had fallen from the sky. But Heracles did not care for stories, only the shape of truth, solid, patient, and unchanging. In the village nearest to Nemea, doors closed when he arrived. Curtains moved, but no faces appeared. A shepherd pointed him toward the caves without meeting his eyes. The same shepherd offered him wine, though thick, red, and cloudy, and Heracles drank it slowly, sitting on a flat stone while dogs barked in the distance. That night, he slept under the stars. The fire crackled quietly, and the sky above him spun in slow circles. He did not dream. Or if he did, the dreams made no sound. In the morning, he walked into the valley. The hills of Nemea were soft but wide. They rolled like sleeping bodies, covered in dry grass and speckled with thorn bushes. The air was quiet here, not peaceful, just heavy, as though something had been holding its breath for too long. Bones lay scattered near the mouth of the cave. Not fresh, not clean. Picked by time and insects and rain, Heracles looked at them for a long time, not with fear, but with stillness. Every broken piece told a story not of death, but of waiting. A jawbone that once shouted, a rib that once expanded with breath, now silent. He stepped closer to the cave. There was no sound, no growl, no movement. Only the slow drip of water from somewhere deep inside, echoing through stone. He waited. Minutes passed, then more, and just when the silence began to stretch too long, a shadow moved. It was larger than he had expected. Its head nearly brushed the top of the cave. Muscles coiled under its golden skin, eyes that did not blink. When it moved, it was not with violence, but with certainty, like something that had never known fear. The first strike was quick. Heracles lunged, club raised, and the club shattered on the lion's back as if it were a twig. The lion did not roar. It only turned, quietly, slowly, as if curious. They circled each other. Dust rose with every step. Heracles dropped what was left of the club and clenched his hands. No weapon, no trick, only strength. And so they wrestled. Flesh against flesh, bone against bone. Heracles grabbed the lion's mane and pulled. The beast bucked and twisted, claws slicing the air. They rolled across the earth once, twice, then locked again. Breath hot against skin, muscles straining, sweat in his eyes. He held tight. He did not speak. He did not shout. He only breathed. And then, finally, the lion stopped moving. He did not let go for a long time. When it was over, Heracles stood still. Chest rising, fingers trembling, the hide beneath his hands still warm. He dragged the lion back to the edge of the valley and sat. For a long time, the sun climbed higher, then began to lower. Shadows stretched. And when night came again, he began to cut. No blade worked. Not iron, not bronze, not stone. The hide rejected them all. So he used the lion's own claw, slowly, carefully, and piece by piece, he peeled it away. The golden skin, thick and strong. The air smelled of blood and dust and old fur, but the wind moved again. The valley breathed. He cleaned the pelt in the stream, hung it on a branch to dry. He washed his hands with sand, ate more bread, looked at the stars, listened to the quiet. In the morning, he put the lion's skin over his shoulders. It covered him like armor, heavy but warm. The head of the beast resting atop his own, its eyes now empty. And so he returned to Tyrants. Not quickly. He walked with the same steady rhythm, same quiet breath. Villagers looked from their windows this time. Some stepped outside. Some whispered. But Heracles said nothing. He did not enter the palace. He stood at the gate, waiting. And when the king looked down from the balcony, he did not cheer. He flinched. Eurystheus ordered that the next task be given from afar, through messengers, behind doors. He feared Heracles now, feared the quiet, heavy steps, feared the golden pelt, feared what came next. But Heracles only nodded. there would be another journey, another labor, another test, and the sun kept moving across the sky. The lion's pelt no longer smelled of blood. Days had passed. Nights, too. The wind had carried away the old scent, and now it was only fur and leather and the faint memory of the valley where the lion had once ruled. Heracles wore it still, draped across his back, the great head of the beast resting upon his shoulders, its open jaws shadowing his brow like a crown of teeth. He walked south now. The path led through olive groves again. Though the trees here grew thinner, the ground became darker. He passed fewer villages, and the rivers he crossed no longer whispered. They gurgled, slow and thick, as though reluctant to move. It was a quieter journey, though the silence was not peaceful. It felt like the stillness before a storm, or before a breath is drawn and held too long. He did not ask why this labor had been chosen: to slay the Hydra of Lerna, a many-headed creature that lived in a damp hollow beyond the swamps. Its breath was poison, they said. Its blood, a dark syrup that killed roots and cracked stone. But Heracles did not fear poison. He feared waste. Waste of time, waste of effort, waste of breath on things not worth saying. So he walked. He traveled with Iolaus, this time his nephew, quiet and clever, with eyes always watching. They did not speak much, but they shared fire, bread, and the same rhythm of footsteps. That was enough. Words were not needed when the path was clear. The land around Lerna changed slowly. The grass grew taller, then wetter, then vanished. Trees stood at strange angles, their roots half submerged in thick water. The air held the scent of rot and moss and time, and the sun, though still shining, felt more distant here. They built no fire that night, only kept close, ate dried figs, drank from wineskins, and listened. Frogs croaked nearby. Somewhere far off, water lapped slowly against something hollow. It was a wet world, soft around the edges, made of water and silence and old things. In the morning, they moved carefully. The marsh did not welcome feet. Each step sank just slightly. Heracles led the way, his lion's cloak brushing reeds and long grasses. Iolaus followed, carrying a torch wrapped in pitch-soaked cloth. They came to the mouth of the Hydra's den not with a shout, but a pause. It was not a cave, not truly, more like an opening beneath twisted roots, where the land dipped and curled inward. A darkness surrounded by water, a still pool, too still. No insects skimmed its surface, no fish moved below. The air tasted sour. Heracles crouched, watching, and then movement. Not sudden, not violent, just a slow, rippling rise from the depths. One head, then two, then five, then 9, long necks of glistening skin, eyes that did not blink, jaws that dripped with slime. Each head moved separately, yet they were one. The Hydra did not roar, it breathed, a long exhale of wet air that turned the reeds black. The earth hissed where the breath touched. Heracles rose. He did not rush. He stepped forward, feet finding dry patches with care. The Hydra lunged. He turned, struck with his club. A head fell, but from the stump 2 new ones grew, twisting, snapping, hissing. He frowned and struck again. The same. One head became 2, then 4. It was not a battle. It was a multiplication. But he did not panic. Instead, he called to Iolaus. No words, just a glance. Iolaus lit the torch. The flame took quickly, hungry, orange, sharp in the gray of the swamp. When Heracles struck again, Iolaus pressed fire to the stump. The flesh sizzled, smoked, and no new head grew. They did it again. Strike, burn, wait. Strike, burn, breathe. It was not fast, but it was sure. The hydra twisted. Heads screamed. The water turned black with its blood. The smell was thick. It coated their skin, their clothes. It crawled into their mouths. But they did not stop. Each head that rose was met with wood and flame, and each time the land grew quieter, until finally the last neck writhed, the last mouth snapped, and silence returned. Heracles stood still. The ground beneath his feet trembled, then stopped. He looked down at his hands. They were dark with soot and blood. His arms ached. His eyes stung from the smoke, but his breath was steady. He turned to Iolaus, who stood holding the torch, now low, flame nearly out. They nodded, nothing more. The marsh around them no longer whispered. It waited. Heracles bent down, drew a blade, and sliced carefully into the creature's flesh. He gathered the thick black blood into a bowl of clay sealed with wax. He would keep it, not for pride, but because it was useful. The blood of the hydra would make his arrows deadly beyond death. They left before the wind changed. The road back was slower. Mud clung to their feet. Reeds brushed their legs. But the sky began to open again. Trees returned. The sun grew closer. They did not speak, and when they reached dry land once more, Heracles turned to look at the swamp one last time. It looked no different. Still quiet, still wet, but something had changed. Not the place, the silence. He walked on. Tyrants lay ahead. The stone walls, the gates, the king behind doors. The next labor would come, the next journey, the next test. But for now, there was only the sound of footsteps, of two men walking, of skin drying slowly in the sun, of weight, not just of the lion's pelt or the blood-soaked club, but of memory. And the road continued. There are battles that end in roars, in fire, in teeth, and there are others that end with a breath, with stillness, with a single moment when all motion stops, not because of fear, but because it is time. Heracles had seen both, and so, when the next task came, he did not raise his voice, nor ask when he would be done. He simply listened, and nodded, and prepared. The third labor was not to slay, but to catch. A hind, not just any deer, but the Cyrenian hind, golden-horned, fleet-footed, sacred to Artemis, the goddess of wild things and moonlight and quiet hunts beneath silver branches. No man had touched it. No hunter had snared it. It ran through Arcadia, through the shadows of old oaks, across rivers that never dried, and meadows that bloomed without end. To catch it was to chase a whisper, and so he chased. He left Tyrans at dawn. The sky was pale. The wind was soft. The lion's pelt hung across his shoulders, though the air was already warm. He carried no blade, only a bow, unstrung, and a coil of fine rope tucked in his pack. He would not need force, he thought, only time. And time he had. Arcadia stretched wide before him, hills upon hills, covered in pine and laurel, with paths that disappeared, and returned without warning. The rivers moved slowly, bending between trees like silver snakes. Birds called from high branches, and insects buzzed through the heat. It was a living land, not wild in the way of danger, but wild in the way of forgetting. It did not care for maps. It did not keep records. If you walked in too far, it might let you leave, or it might not. Heracles followed the hoof prints. At first they were clear, small, delicate marks pressed into soft mud, outlined by morning dew. But they vanished often. The hind did not run in straight lines. It wandered, circled, climbed rocky slopes, leapt narrow streams, slipped through thickets so tight even air had to pause. And he followed. Days passed, then weeks, then months. The bow remained unstrung. The rope remained coiled. He walked through villages where no one knew his name, slept beneath olive trees, beneath stars, beneath soft clouds that drifted like herds of white animals. He ate little, drank from springs, listened to the wind, and waited. Sometimes he saw her, the flash of golden antlers in the distance, a flicker of movement between trees, the sound of hooves tapping stone too light to chase, too quick to catch. She was not afraid of him, but she did not stop, and so he learned to slow. He stopped forcing his pace and began to move like the land. He woke with the birds, slept with the frogs, let his path curve instead of cut, let his breath match the sound of the trees in the wind. He became part of the forest, and the forest noticed. On a morning wrapped in fog, he came to a small clearing. The grass was wet, the light dim, and there, not 10 paces ahead, stood the hind. Her coat shimmered like morning frost. Her horns curved like twin branches of polished amber. She looked at him and did not flee. He did not move. She lowered her head, ate a single leaf, then walked slowly across the clearing and disappeared into the trees. And Heracles followed, not with speed, but with stillness. This time, she did not vanish completely. He saw her again that evening drinking from a stream, her reflection a blur in the rippling water. Again the next day, crossing a sunlit meadow. Again the next, beneath the shadow of a rocky cliff where birds made their nests in cracks. Each time, closer. Each time, longer. He spoke to her once, not with words, just a breath, a hum, and she turned her head as if she heard, as if she remembered a sound like that long ago. Then she ran, not with panic, but with joy, and still he followed, until one night, under a silver moon, she stopped. There was no sound in the woods, not even leaves, only the hum of night. She stood by a shallow pool, her hooves just touching the edge, her breath slow, her ears alert, and Heracles approached. Step by step, carefully, silently. When he was near enough, he knelt. He did not reach for his bow. He did not lift the rope. He only knelt, and she watched him. Minutes passed. Then, gently, without fear, she stepped toward him. One step, then two, close enough that he could see the tiny flecks of white on her nose, the rise and fall of her chest, the twitch of her tail. She was real, and alive, and wild. He reached out, slowly, and let the rope fall open in his hand, not to trap her, but to offer her a choice. and she stepped into the loop, not because he was stronger, but because he had waited, because he had learned the rhythm of the land, because he had changed. He led her gently, through the woods, back through the valleys, across the rivers, through the places where her tracks once danced. Now she walked beside him, her steps light, her head held high. She did not resist. She did not run. Some said Artemis herself had watched, that she had allowed it, that she had smiled. And when Heracles returned to Tiryns, the people stared not at him, but at her, at the creature no one had caught, at the creature that walked beside him, unbound except by trust. Eurystheus ordered her taken, to be shown, to be proof. But the moment Heracles let go of the rope, she turned, and she vanished into the trees. They searched for hours, but she was gone, returned to her woods, her hills, her mist. And Heracles said nothing, only watched the trees for a long time, then turned once more to the open road. The next labor awaited, but the sound of hooves on soft grass lingered long in his memory. The wind was different in the mountains. It did not whisper like the wind of the valleys. It did not hum like the forest breeze. It howled, low and constant, like an old voice that had been speaking for centuries, never stopping, only changing its tone. And Heracles walked into it. The fourth labor had come. A boar, not a lion, not a serpent, not a gentle hind that shimmered like water, but a beast of flesh and muscle and tusks. The Erymanthian boar. It lived in the highlands, among pine trees that bent under snow, on cliffs where the sky pressed close, in hollows where the cold never left, even in spring. It was said to be the size of a bull, covered in black bristles, coarse as spears, with tusks that curved like scythes, and a scream that shook the frost from the branches. Heracles did not pack for war, only for cold. A thicker cloak, a flask of oil, a new pair of sandals layered with wool, wrapped in leather. He carried his bow this time, but not strung. He did not know yet if arrows would help. The road to Erymanthus narrowed with every mile. Olive trees disappeared. Laurel gave way to pine. The earth grew hard. Rocks jutted from the hills like broken teeth. He passed few travelers, only hunters, eyes tight with frost, their shoulders burdened with traps and silence. They warned him, not with words, with looks, but he continued. Days grew shorter, nights longer. He slept beside fire when he could find dry wood. When he couldn't, he curled against boulders, wrapping the lion's pelt tighter around his shoulders, pressing his face into the warmth of old fur. The hide still smelled faintly of dust and sun. It remembered heat, even when the world forgot. One night, snow fell. Not fast, not in thick curtains, but steadily, flake after flake, drifting from the sky like ash from a gentle fire. He woke with a thin layer across his chest, white dust, cold breath, and the sound of nothing. No birds, no branches, just the sound of snow landing softly on itself. He stood, stretched, and continued. The climb was slow. The forest here did not grow for men. Branches snagged at sleeves. Roots curled over the path like fingers. Fallen trunks blocked the way, and the silence grew deeper the higher he went. Then, one evening, he saw smoke, thin, pale, rising from behind a ridge. He followed it and found the cave of Pholus, the centaur. Pholus was not like the others. He did not drink to forget or fight to remember. He lived alone, tending bees and carving bowls from soft wood. He welcomed Heracles not as a hero, but as a guest, with warm hands and a place by the fire. The cave smelled of honey and pine sap. The walls were lined with jars, some filled with wax, others with berries, still others with roots tied in bunches with cord. There was bread, baked in coals, and wine, deep red, aged in dark amphorae, sealed with resin and care. They ate in quiet. Heracles peeled bark from a small log, listening to the crackle of the fire. Pholus stirred honey into warm wine, offering it in shallow clay cups. Outside, the wind howled again, but inside warmth. They spoke only once. "The boar sleeps beneath the cliffs," said Pholus, tracing a line on the table with his fingertip. "He wakes when the wind howls loud enough." Heracles nodded, and they said no more. That night, he slept inside, wrapped not in fur, but in the scent of cedar and smoke, dreaming of hooves on stone, of roots deep in frozen earth, of silence that waited. In the morning, he left. Pholus gave him a flask of resin. "Fire doesn't like snow," he said, "but this helps it dry." And Heracles went up. The forest thinned. Rocks grew larger. The ground tilted beneath his feet, each step louder than the last. Crunching, cracking, breaking silence. He saw prints in the snow, large, round, pressed deep. Bore. The trail led through a narrow pass, where the wind cut sideways and snow drifted knee-high. Here, the trees had long given up. Only stumps remained, buried in white. The footprints widened, sank deeper. Heracles slowed, and then he saw it, a shape, moving, not fast, not small. The boar, its back arched high, covered in black hair tipped with frost. Steam curled from its nostrils. Its eyes gleamed beneath heavy brows. It dug at the ground with thick legs, tossing snow in bursts. Heracles did not rush. He watched. The creature snorted, paused, then turned. It saw him and charged. The sound was not a roar. It was a thunder crack. Snow lifted in clouds as hooves struck ground. Trees bent from the force of its passing, and Heracles stood still. Then, at the last moment, he moved. Not back, but sideways. The boar missed by inches, crashing past, skidding through snow, sliding into a fallen tree. Heracles turned. The boar rose, snorted, charged again. This time, Heracles was ready. He ducked low, grabbed the beast by its shoulders, and threw his weight sideways. The boar thrashed, screeched, kicked. Snow flew. Blood not his splattered the ice. He wrestled it, hands locked around its neck, knees pressed into its sides, breath steaming in clouds. The beast fought, but Heracles held, long, hard, until the legs slowed, until the head dropped, until it lay still, alive, but still. He did not kill it. That was not the task, only to bring it back. And so he bound its legs with thick rope, tied it with leather straps, waited until it woke again. It growled, but did not break free. He dragged it down the mountain, through snow, through frost, through forest, each step slow, each breath visible, each branch a hand reaching. At night he made fire, and the boar watched. They were not friends, but they shared cold and flame and silence. On the 7th day, he reached the lowlands. The trees grew taller again, snow thinned, rivers unfroze, and he walked back into Tyrants, dragging the beast behind him. The people stared at the size, at the tusks, at the steam rising from its flanks. Eurystheus hid, ordered the boar placed far, far away, and Heracles let go. He watched the beast be taken, and when it was gone, he washed his hands in a bowl of melted snow. The cold lingered in his fingers, even as the sun returned, even as the next labor waited. The Augean stables. Some labors are loud. They shake the sky, echo through the mountains, leave claw marks and blood behind. Others come quietly. They do not roar. They do not hunt. They do not strike. They wait. They fester. They settle into the bones of a place, and they stay until someone comes not with a sword, but with sleeves rolled up. And so came the 5th labor. Heracles had not yet healed from the cold. The mountains still lingered in his joints, in the way his fingers stiffened at night, in the way his shoulders pulled under the lion's pelt, in the way his breath still paused when the wind changed. But Eurystheus sent him onward. Clean the stables of King Augeas. Augeas, ruler of Elis, keeper of flocks, so vast they blackened hills, so numerous they turned pastures into seas of shifting wool and cloven hooves. His stables were ancient, long stone halls built before his father's father was born, and they had not been cleaned in years, perhaps decades, perhaps longer. No one remembered when the last shovel had touched the floor. No servant volunteered. No air moved inside. Only flies and the slow drip of rot. The stables stank from miles away. They stank of time, of waste, of things left undone for too long. Heracles walked, not with urgency, but with steadiness. The land grew flatter, grass returned. Sunlight warmed the backs of stones. Olive trees twisted toward the sky, and bees hummed in wildflowers again. It was not a land of monsters. It was a land of labor. Elis lay in the wide valley of the Alpheus River, a kingdom of fields and barns and quiet houses with stone steps worn smooth by bare feet. When Heracles arrived, the people watched him pass, not with awe, not with fear, but with something softer, a mixture of pity and relief. Someone else would face the smell. Someone else would walk into that place. The king greeted him with a smirk. Augeas was old, though he tried not to be. His robes were new, but his voice cracked like old leather. His hands wore rings, but his eyes were tired. He laughed when he heard the task spoken aloud. "Clean them in one day," he said. "Then we'll speak of reward." He thought it was a joke, but Heracles only nodded. He did not eat, he did not drink. He only walked down the long slope, past the fields, past the barns, past the herders who looked away as he passed. And he came to the stables. They stretched longer than a shipyard. Stone walls mossy with time, arched roofs of dark wood blackened by sun and age. The air grew thick near them, not with danger, but with the slow breath of filth. Flies hung in clouds. The ground sucked at his sandals. Birds did not perch on the beams. No wind entered. The doors stood shut. He opened them, and the stench rolled out. It was not the sharp smell of fresh manure. It was deeper, older. It smelled of wet straw turned to mud, of mold, of breath exhaled by animals that had never seen the sky. It smelled of days forgotten, of neglect layered upon neglect. The floor could not be seen. The dung lay in soft waves, pressed and hardened by years of hooves. Muck reached up the walls. Bones of rats peeked through. Somewhere, a horse snorted, long and slow. Then silence. He stood at the threshold, watching, breathing through his mouth, feeling the weight of the place press into his skin. And then he began to walk. He did not begin with tools. He walked the length of it first, slow steps, observing, measuring, counting the arches, marking the slope of the ground. The way the light barely entered through narrow slits in the stone, he touched the walls, noted the dampness, the way water had once flowed and no longer did. And when he reached the far end, he stood for a long time, listening, not to the animals, but to the land. Then he turned, left the stable, walked to the edge of the nearby hill where the rivers met. The Alpheus, the Peneus, both wide, strong, cold, fed by mountain springs, restless, like thoughts before sleep. He studied the bend in the water, the way it leaned toward the fields, the sound it made around stone. And then he began to dig. Not alone, he borrowed no men, but he used the land. A spade, a crowbar, levers made from tree limbs, stones rolled from the hillside. He dug 2 channels deep, straight, deliberate, one leading from the Alpheus, one returning to the Peneus. It took hours. Sweat soaked his back. Mud caked his arms. The sun rose, fell, rose again. Still, he dug. And when the ditches were ready, he struck the last stone aside. The river surged, not in a roar, but a long sigh, like a held breath released. The water raced down the trench, curved toward the stable, and flowed inside. The flood was not violent. It did not destroy. It washed. It soaked the layers of filth, softened the rot, lifted the old straw, the dried dung, the slick bones of forgotten mice. It filled the stone aisles with clean, rushing water, swirled into dark corners, broke through crusted piles like gentle hands. And then it flowed out again, carrying the waste with it, out the other side, into the second channel, back to the Peneus. The stables breathed for the first time in years. Light entered, air moved, the horses stamped, shook their heads. Their coats shone, slowly, under the dripping beams. Heracles watched, not with pride, only with patience. He stepped inside, walked once more the full length. Now the stone floor showed itself, slick but clean. The troughs echoed with the sound of dripping. A spider climbed upward along the wall, fleeing the new wind. And Heracles turned. He walked back to the palace. The king did not laugh this time. He argued, claimed it was not cleaning, it was cheating. You used rivers, he said. You moved the land. But Heracles did not answer. He left the palace, left the valley, left the stink. Behind him, the stable stood, cleansed, empty, still damp, but ready. And the land remembered. Where filth had sat, now mint grew by the channels. Where rats had hidden, now birds circled in the air. And water spoke through stone, soft and endless. The next labor would come, but this one left no blood, only breath and the soft rhythm of moving water. There are places in the world that do not belong entirely to the world, places that sit at the edge of silence, where sound does not echo, where light does not reflect, where water stands still, not from lack of movement, but from the memory of too much. Stymphalus was one such place. Heracles walked slowly into its shadow. The task was simple, as words often are. Drive away the birds of Stymphalus, creatures sacred to no god, feared by all men, birds not of feather, but of metal, with beaks like spears and wings that slice the air, their cries sharp enough to crack pottery, their feathers sharp enough to pierce bone. They nested deep in the marshlands, beneath a sky that never cleared, around a lake that never dried, and their numbers were too many to count. It was not a place of war, nor peace, nor even death. It was a place of waiting. He left Tyrins alone again. The sun followed behind him like a shadow, soft and reluctant. He passed groves where trees leaned inward, as if trying to escape something behind them. Villagers along the way offered no fruit, no wine, only directions, quickly given, then forgotten. None had gone near the lake in years. None wanted to speak its name. The road turned to mud before he reached it. No stones to mark a path, only reeds, sedge, pools of standing water that reflected only the sky, never the face of the one who looked. The sound of frogs came and went, then even that vanished. The lake revealed itself not with grandeur, but with a kind of soft dread, a wide mirror of stillness, ringed by dead trees, covered with mist that moved like breath across skin. Not fog, but mist that knew where it wanted to go. It curled along the waterline, slid between branches, brushed the tops of broken cattails that had not swayed in years. He did not see the birds at first, only the shapes they left behind, small bones stripped clean, water that rippled without cause, feathers, here and there not soft, but stiff, tinged green like old copper. He picked one up. It was sharp enough to cut skin without pressure. He let it fall. Heracles set camp beneath the leaning trunk of a water-bent tree. No fire, fire smoked and smoke rose. And here, nothing rose. Everything sank sound, warmth, breath. He ate bread and dried fish, chewed slowly, listening, waiting. That night, they came. Not all at once, not in a storm of wings, but gradually. The sky began to fill not with cloud, but with motion. The kind that made no sound at first, just a pressure, a subtle push against the chest, a shift in the weight of the air, then a cry, high-pitched, metallic, unnatural, not bird, not beast. It cut through the night like a thrown knife. Then another, then many. Wings beat overhead. Sharp shadows crossed the ground. Heracles stood slowly, hand on the unstrung bow, eyes turned upward. They circled not low, but watchful, beaks gleaming even in the dark, feathers rattling like dry leaves in metal wind. They did not dive. Not yet. They were not afraid. They were curious. He stayed still until dawn, The light brought little warmth. It filtered through the mist like milk through gauze. He could see shapes now, nests high in twisted branches, made not of twigs, but of wire and bone. Birds perched like statues, unmoving. One turned its head. The motion was too clean, too exact. He could not shoot them, not one by one, not 10, not 50. They were too many. And then he remembered. Not steel, not fire, but sound. He reached into his pack and removed the gift Athena had given him, a pair of crotala, bronze clappers, small, flat, polished, smooth. They looked simple, but when struck together, they did not make a sharp noise. They made a resonance, a ripple of sound that passed not only through air, but through thought, through water, through wood. He struck them once. The sound rang out not loud, but deep. It spread in waves. The birds froze. He struck them again. Wings opened. Again. A cry broke from the flock. Then another. Then a storm. They rose. All of them. Not in order. Not in fear. But in a burst of broken motion, wings colliding, claws slashing, beaks crying out. They lifted into the sky, circling faster, higher, then scattered, east, north, south, away from the sound, away from him. Feathers rained down, not soft, not silent, but hissing through the air like darts. He raised his lion's pelt over his head. They hit. Some pierced earth. Others cracked against stone. One caught his forearm and drew blood, a thin line of red against his skin. He did not flinch. He kept striking the clappers, over and over, until the sky emptied, until silence returned. Not peace, but absence. He lowered his arms. His breath came in misted clouds. His hands trembled. The crotala fell still. The water beneath the trees rippled not from birds, but from the echo of their leaving. Heracles sat by the tree, not in victory, but in stillness. He would not see them again, but he would remember the sound of wings without feathers, of flight without softness, of creatures born of metal and memory and something older than fear. He slept at midday. That evening, he walked around the lake once more. The nests were quiet. The air was lighter. Frogs began to croak again. A fish jumped. Somewhere, deep in the reeds, a real bird called a small sound, almost shy. The land was remembering itself. When he left Stymphalus, he did not look back. He did not need to. The silence behind him had changed, and before him the road stretched onward, long and winding, toward the next labor, toward the next waiting place. There are journeys that begin not with urgency, but with stillness, where the road unfolds slowly, where each step is not a chase, but a measure of breath. And on such a road, Heracles traveled to Crete. He came by ship. The sea was calm, its waves slow and deliberate, folding into one another like the breath of a giant asleep beneath the surface. The boat creaked gently, its ropes groaning in rhythm with the swell. Gulls called overhead, and the salt hung in the air like memory, sharp, clean, ancient. Crete rose from the horizon, not like a mountain, but like a promise. White hills, soft cliffs, olive trees clinging to stone, and in the distance, long fields of grass rippling under wind like waves of green fire. A land of old kings and older stories, of labyrinths and silence, of gods who watched from behind thin veils of cloud. The bull had once belonged to Minos. A gift, they said, from Poseidon himself, sent from the sea, white as foam, strong as storm, but it was not sacrificed as it should have been. It was kept, worshipped, forgotten, then cursed. Now it wandered the island, no longer sacred, no longer tame, breaking fences, crushing soil, tossing shadows against walls at dusk. And Heracles came to find it. The people of Crete did not meet him with fear. They had seen storms. They had lived near gods. Instead, they offered bread and water drawn from deep stone wells, figs still warm from the sun, rooms with thick curtains that moved in the wind. Their homes were cool, their hands rough from work, and their stories soft-spoken. They spoke of the bull with respect, not as a monster, but as a thing that could not be understood, something born from beyond and misplaced. He listened. He stayed a night in a stone house where vines grew along the doorway. An old woman showed him the olive press in her courtyard and the way rainwater was caught from the roof in clay jars. They ate lentils with thyme, and she told him how, years ago, the bull had stood still in the fields at sunrise, not grazing, not moving, only watching the sea. The next morning, he rose early, before the bells, before the sun had lifted fully above the sea. The air was warm already, and the land breathed upward heat rising from the rocks, from the grass, from the dirt paths trodden by generations. He walked through olive groves, where the ground was dry and cracked, through fig orchards, where wasps buzzed low, and the fruit hung heavy on bent branches. He passed shepherds, their flocks slow and dusty, their staffs tapping against stone with a hollow rhythm. Then he came to the fields, where the bull had last been seen. They were wide, open, quiet. No fences stood here, only the remnants, broken posts, scattered boards, rope snapped clean through. The grass had been flattened in great swathes, turned to paths without direction. Dung, dry and fresh, spotted the soil. And far off, near the edge of a low ridge, something moved. It was not a shadow. It was not a man. The bull stood taller than any he had seen, white, but not pale. The white of bone under sunlight. The white of heat. Its horns curled gently, not jagged, but smooth, and its shoulders moved like rising hills when it breathed. It did not look at him. It looked at the sea. Heracles did not approach it once. He sat in the grass, unwrapped bread from cloth, ate slowly, drank water, wiped his hands on his knees, watched the wind move through the bull's fur, a ripple of light, a shimmer of sweat. The bull snorted once and began to move, not at him, not away, just walking, as though it were the land itself shifting direction. Heracles rose and followed, not close, not loud. He matched the rhythm, footsteps in grass, leather on dirt, heat pressing down. The bull paused at a dry creek bed, dug at the ground with one hoof, then turned. It saw him and charged. The earth shook, but not like thunder, like something older, like the memory of something buried deep. He waited until the last breath, then moved, not left, not right, forward. They collided, not with noise, but with weight. A sound like the cracking of bone, like stone into stone. He grabbed the horns, not to twist, not to wound, to hold. The bull pushed, strained, bucked. Heracles dug in his heels. The lion's pelt slipped. Dust rose. Muscles tightened. Time stopped. Then slowly, step by step, he turned the bull's head. Not through force, through stillness, through waiting, through the strength of being unmoved. The bull's legs slid. Its breath came sharp. It reared once, twice, then stilled, not in defeat, in pause. Heracles stepped back. The bull stood, eyes wide, chest heaving, but it did not charge again. And so he wrapped a rope gently around its neck, soft, thick, tied with patience. He led it down the hill, through grass, through dust, through silence. People watched from a distance, not clapping, not cheering, only watching. And the wind from the sea carried the smell of salt and thyme and earth, baked dry by time. He brought the bull to the ships, left it where he was told. No words, no struggle. The bull stood quietly, looking back toward the hills, and Heracles sat on the edge of the dock, feet hanging above the water, eyes closed. The sea breathed, and he too let the day pass without speaking, because sometimes a labor is not in the breaking, but in the holding, not in shouting, but in silence, not in fear, but in patience. Some places are shaped not by the gods, but by the wind. And in the far north, where the sea is colder and the earth stays damp long after the rains have gone, there stood a land not ruled by time or law, but by appetite. Heracles walked into it. This labor did not begin with a king's order, nor with a scroll, nor with fanfare. It began with a name whispered like a warning: Diomedes, a son of Ares, a war-born man with no wars left to fight, ruler of a ragged land, keeper of horses that did not graze, did not carry riders, did not sleep standing, horses that fed on flesh. The mares of Diomedes. Heracles had heard of them before, all had. They were not beasts, but curses, with eyes rimmed in red and mouths that steamed in summer air. Their chains dragged through mud and stone, heavy not from weight, but from the weight of what they had seen. It was said they ate men alive, that they chewed through bone like grain, that they screamed when they were hungry, and they were always hungry. He walked north for many days. The air grew colder, not with season, but with place. The grass lost color, the stones grew sharp, and the sea, which followed to his left, took on a new tone, not the deep blue of sunlit water, but a gray so heavy it made the world feel older. Villages were rare, doors stayed shut. Smoke rose only at dusk. People watched him from behind curtains, children quieted not with words, but with gestures, hands drawn across lips. The further he went, the fewer voices he heard, only gulls and wind. Then came the marshes. They were not named on any map. No sign marked the edge. He simply stepped one day from soil onto something softer, springier, colder. The reeds grew taller than a man, and the path beneath him vanished. Water pooled in strange places, reflecting no sky. Insects buzzed in low, vibrating tones, as if trying not to be noticed. Each footstep drew sound, but the sound did not echo. It sank. He smelled the horses before he saw them. Not manure, but iron, wet leather. The sharp, sour scent of flesh too long exposed to air. He stopped walking, closed his eyes, breathed through his mouth. then continued. They were tied to stone posts, driven deep into the marsh. 4 of them. Tall, ribbed, with coats like tarnished bronze, their manes tangled with seaweed and burrs, their mouths bloodied, their eyes never blinking. They did not move as he approached, but their ears flicked. Once, twice, and their breath came out in thick clouds that did not disperse. The chains around their necks were thick as a man's wrist, black with rust. The ground beneath them churned from pacing earth, flattened, trampled, still wet. And beside them stood Diomedes. He did not wear a crown. He did not carry a scepter, only a blade, half buried in the mud beside him, and eyes that had forgotten how to close. "You've come to take them," he said. Heracles said nothing. "You won't." A pause. "They eat heroes." Still, Heracles said nothing. Diomedes stepped forward. Not fast, not slow, just with the weight of someone who had not slept in years. "The chains don't hold them," he said. "I do." Then he reached for the blade. It came from the ground, with a sound like breath from a dying fire, wet, final. And Heracles moved. There was no crowd, no arena, no dust, only the wet slap of feet in mud, the grunt of impact, the crack of shoulder into chest. The horses screamed, their chains rattled, but neither man looked at them. They wrestled in silence, one trying to end, the other only to hold. When it was over, Diomedes lay still, breathing, then not. Heracles stood. His chest rose and fell. His arms shook. Blood not his dripped from his hands. The horses watched, still, silent, waiting. Then something shifted. The mares stepped forward, not in hunger, in quiet. They sniffed the air, the scent of death, and they bent their necks. One bite, then another. The work was slow, mechanical, like chewing old leather. Heracles turned away. He did not stop them. He did not speak. He only waited. When the last bone sank into the mud, the horses stepped back. Their eyes no longer burned. The chains hung loose, and they followed him, not with joy, not with peace, but with obedience. He led them through the marshes, one step, then another, the path forming only as he walked, reeds parting, water closing behind, no sound but hooves in wet earth and the slow drag of rusted links. At night they did not sleep, but they lay down, and the air grew warmer. By the time he reached the edge of the marshes, the horses were quiet, still powerful, still strange, but quiet. He found a dry field where flowers had not grown in years. He untied their chains, let them wander. They did not run. They stayed. The sun was rising, pale and slow, and the frost on the grass began to melt. Heracles sat by a stone and breathed, not deeply, not heavily, just enough, because some tasks do not end with victory, only with rest, and the sound of breath returning to a place that had forgotten it. Some journeys are not made on roads. They are made across the space between two hearts that do not yet trust each other. And this labor was such a journey. It began not with danger, but with a request. Not for glory, but for a gift. The daughter of Eurystheus, young and quiet, had asked for something few would dare to seek the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Not a simple girdle, not a trinket of leather and gold, but a symbol, a token of leadership, of choice, of strength, wrapped not in steel, but in the quiet power of a woman who commanded without raising her voice. Heracles set out without weapons drawn. He carried his club, yes, and the lion's pelt still draped across his shoulders like a reminder of silence, of breath held in dark caves. But he did not wear war. He traveled by sea first, a long stretch of pale blue that gave way to deeper color the further he drifted from home. The sun traced wide circles overhead, and the sailors moved around him as if he were carved from wood. They respected his quiet, but did not join it. The land of the Amazons lay beyond Thrace, past the rivers that carried the scent of snow, past forests where trunks stood like the columns of a temple too large to see in full. There were no clear borders, no walls, no guards, just the gradual shift in the way the air felt cleaner, sharper, not cold but aware. Every leaf seemed to listen. Every breeze passed with purpose. He found them not because they were hiding, but because they allowed themselves to be found. They rode in silence, bows slung across their backs, spears tipped, not with decoration, but with precision. Their horses moved like thoughts across the land, quick, deliberate, never wasted. They saw him long before he saw them. When they emerged from the trees, it was not a trap, not an ambush. It was an invitation. Hippolyta was not as tall as some said, nor as fierce. She did not wear a crown. Her hair was bound in simple braids, her eyes calm, her armor plain. But when she spoke, the world around her stilled. Even the wind quieted. She did not shout, she did not posture. She simply looked at him. "You've come for the belt," she said. Heracles nodded. "And if I say no, I ask again. And if I still say no, then I leave." She studied him, not for threat, for weight, for the shape of his honesty. "Come," she said, "eat first." He followed her to their camp, not tents, but structures of woven bark and cloth, shaded by branches. The fire was low, the food simple, grains mixed with honey, figs soaked in cool water, bread baked flat and folded with herbs. He sat among them, not as guest, not as enemy, as something in between. They spoke little, but when they did, it was not of war, it was of the land, of horses, of childbirth, of how to twist vines so they held without breaking, of how to tan leather without bitterness in the smell. He listened, not just with ears, but with the part of the body that remembers warmth. Hippolyta spoke that night, by the fire, with stars hidden behind the smoke. "You think this belt is power, that it gives command, that it grants strength." He said nothing. "It does not." Still he waited. "It is a memory, a chain of promises, from mothers to daughters, from warriors to those who would hold the line next. It is old, it is worn, but it holds something no hand can take." He looked at her, not with argument, but with understanding. "Then why let it go?" "Because the girl who asked for it does not know what it means yet, but she might, and you do not come with fire." She unfastened it, slowly. The leather creaked with age, the gold dull, like the color of a field at dusk. She placed it in his hands, and still, the night continued. No battle, no blood, Only two figures under stars, the air between them filled with the quiet weight of choices made without noise. But peace is not a story others like to hear. For even as Heracles prepared to leave, ships from Tiryns arrived at the edge of the land. Soldiers. Not many, but loud. Sent by Eurystheus, who had feared treachery, or perhaps had hoped for it. The Amazons saw the ships, raised weapons, not with rage, but readiness. Hippolyta stood between them. Heracles, too, not with blade, but with breath. The soldiers hesitated. There was no war, not that day, only silence, and the soft crunch of feet retreating through dry grass. He left the land of the Amazons with the belt wrapped in linen. He did not carry it high. He did not speak of how he gained it, only that it was given. And in the girl's eyes, when she touched it, he saw something open, not a door, but a window, a space where strength might grow, not from force, but from stillness. And so he walked again, into the long road that stretched toward his next labor, where the sun would fall softer, and breath would slow once more. Some journeys feel like they have no beginning and no end. They stretch beyond the edges of the map into lands where names fall away, where stars change their pattern in the sky, and where footsteps are swallowed by the heat before they leave a print behind. The task seemed simple when spoken aloud, bring back the cattle of Geryon. But there is nothing simple in a road that burns underfoot, nor in crossing places where no story dares to linger. Heracles began with only a direction, west, toward the edge of the world, past fields he had never walked, past rivers that did not have names in his tongue, past hills where the wind carried languages he did not speak. He moved with the sun always in his face, the lion's pelt a shield from the heat, the club slung across his back, growing heavier with each mile. He crossed dry plains, where the grass was brittle and yellow, and the sky so wide it made even his broad shoulders feel small. The people he passed watched him not with awe, but with the flat, exhausted gaze of those who had seen too many travelers try to reach the end of something and fail. They offered him wine thick with dust, water drawn from cracked wells, bread that crumbled before it reached the mouth. No one asked where he was going. All of them already knew. The land changed as he moved forward. Olive trees vanished, then wheat, then even scrub. The earth turned red and hot, cracked open like skin in the sun. And in that space, where breath itself seemed to weigh more, he met the heat not just in air, but in light. The sky was fire, not metaphor, but memory. He passed through the desert of Libya, where the sand hissed underfoot and the night gave no coolness. He saw mirages not of water, but of old faces, his own among them, cast forward like warnings from the hours still to come. When he reached the ocean, it did not bring relief. The waters of the far west were not the blue of the Aegean, but a darker, slower green full of weight and silence. Here he built an altar to Helios, the sun, and prayed not for favor, but for shade. And the god, amused or moved, lent him a golden cup, not small, a vessel so wide it could carry a man across the sea, and it did. Heracles stepped inside, and the cup drifted westward, smooth across the surface of the world, as though time itself paused to watch. On the other shore, the island of Erythea waited. Low hills, red rock, windless air. No birds, no insects. just the sound of silence stretching from stone to stone. He stepped out of the cup and walked into the dust. The cattle were not hard to find. They were enormous, red. Each step they took pressed deep into the earth. Their horns curled like ancient rivers, their eyes soft but distant. They did not fear him. They grazed slowly, without hurry, like creatures who had forgotten what it was to be moved by anything but hunger. They were watched not by men, but by a dog. 2 heads, thick shoulders, breath like the smell of metal. Orthrus, the brother of Cerberus, chained not with iron, but with duty. The dog did not bark. It ran. Straight at Heracles, he met it with the club. Not out of anger, but necessity. The sound was dull. The dog fell, still warm, still heavy. Eurytion came next, the herdsman, long hair, skin the color of burnt stone. A spear in one hand, eyes narrow. He did not shout, he only struck. And Heracles caught the shaft, broke it in two, and lowered the man to the ground with hands made for lifting mountains. Then came Geryon. 3 bodies, 1 soul, arms enough for battle, eyes enough to watch every side. He wore bronze and red. He moved with care, like someone who knew the weight of his own legend. He did not ask questions. He did not offer peace. He raised his sword, and Heracles loosed an arrow dipped in the blood of the Hydra. It struck through metal, through skin, through silence. Geryon fell not with thunder, but with a sound like sand collapsing under its own weight. Heracles stood alone again. The sun overhead did not blink. The wind did not return. Only the cattle remained, chewing slowly, and so he began to move them. It took days, weeks. They walked slowly, pausing often, requiring water where there was none, shelter where there were only rocks. He guided them through valleys that bent under their hooves, across rivers that darkened with their passage. At night he sat awake, listening to their breath. The sound was steady, like old drums. One was lost in a canyon, another stolen by bandits and reclaimed. Hera, jealous still, sent gadflies to scatter the herd, and Heracles ran for hours beneath the sun, calling, coaxing, carrying calves in his arms like fire. He drove them across mountains, plains, the edge of the world folding backward behind him with every step. When he crossed back into Tiryns, his hair was longer, his hands darker, his skin marked with dust that no water could fully remove. The cattle followed, tired, silent, still, magnificent. Eurystheus did not come to see them. He ordered them sacrificed, and they were. With smoke rising in thick spirals toward a sky that did not answer, Heracles said nothing. He had not done this for gold, nor for favor, only for the rhythm of the road, for the silence in his chest that matched the silence of the land he had walked. And as the ashes rose, he turned again, one step, then another, toward what waited next, toward the earth, which never ran out of distance. There are places in the world that the world has forgotten, not because they are lost, but because they never belong to it fully. They sit beyond rivers that do not appear on maps, beneath skies that do not hold stars in the same constellations, in silence that does not echo and does not end. And the garden of the Hesperides was such a place. It was said that the apples grew there golden, round, untouched by time, not fruit for hunger, but for memory, symbols of eternity. gifts for gods. Heracles did not ask why they were needed. He no longer asked such things. When Eurystheus gave the order, it came without explanation. Bring me the apples of the Hesperides. No location, no guide, just a name. He set out westward again, beyond the familiar roads, into lands where even the trees seemed to grow differently, not taller or stranger, just quieter. He passed mountain passes that narrowed into nothing. He crossed rivers by feeling for stones beneath the surface. He slept beneath skies that offered no dreams. At night, he listened to the wind, and sometimes it spoke. Not in words, in rhythm, in long, slow exhales that brushed against the earth like the hands of something old. He asked those he met along the way, and all gave him different answers. The garden lies at the base of the world. The garden lies where sunset never fades. The garden is not a place, but a time. One day, he met Nereus, the old man of the sea, a figure of fish-scale skin and long kelp-colored hair. Nereus did not speak at first, only watched him with eyes that had seen oceans birthed and dried. Heracles did not force him. He waited, and when the tide shifted, Nereus told him, not the path, but the way of walking. Do not seek the garden, he said. Wait until it allows you to find it. Heracles nodded and walked on. Time unraveled. He forgot how many days passed, how many nights. His beard grew. His hands grew dark. The lion's pelt, once bright, now carried the color of dust and silence. Then, one evening, the sky changed. Not with color, with tone. The light softened. Shadows lengthened, but did not darken. The air smelled of nothing. No wind, no birdsong, only the faint hum of being. And there it was. The garden. It lay beyond a low rise, surrounded not by walls, but by distance. Trees grew here not in rows, but in reverence. Their trunks smooth, their branches heavy with golden fruit that shimmered without shining. The grass beneath them did not bend when stepped upon. It accepted weight without memory. The sky above held no sun, yet everything was lit, and in the center, coiled around the roots of the trees, slept a dragon, Ladon. It did not open its eyes. It did not bare teeth. It simply breathed a sound deeper than any wind, slower than any tide. Heracles stood still, not in fear, in understanding. He would not steal from this place. He would not break its silence, not with force, not with fire. There was another way. Atlas. He found the Titan beyond the trees, kneeling beneath the weight of the sky. His shoulders wide, his back scarred from centuries of carrying the heavens. He did not speak at first. His breath came slow. His eyes were not tired. They were ancient. Heracles spoke carefully. I must take the apples. Atlas smiled. And you wish me to fetch them? Yes. Then you must take this, for a while. And Heracles agreed. He stepped beneath the vault of the sky, took its weight onto his shoulders, and it was more than mass. It was history, memory, the pulse of stars and the cry of distant suns. He felt time move across his back like a tide of molten thought. It did not hurt. It simply pressed. Atlas walked away, and the world continued. Heracles stood. He did not count the minutes. He did not move. He became part of the stillness, a figure beneath the turning of the world. And when Atlas returned, holding 3 golden apples in a cloth of woven starlight, he smiled. Perhaps I should take these to Eurystheus myself, he said. But Heracles only looked at him, not pleading, not angry, just waiting. And Atlas, who had once held the sky out of punishment, now held it out of choice. He laughed. He took the weight again. Heracles stepped away. The apples were warm in his hands, not glowing, but living. He did not touch them more than once, did not taste them. He wrapped them and walked away, out of the garden. The dragon still slept. The sky did not change. The wind did not return, and the trees behind him remembered nothing. The journey home was long, but it did not stretch. It folded, as though the world itself knew this was not a labor of distance, but of silence. When he returned, Eurystheus did not touch the apples. He looked at them from a distance, then ordered them returned. Heracles said nothing, and brought them back to the garden that had not moved, where the dragon still breathed, and time forgot itself once more. There are places where footsteps do not echo, not because they are swallowed by space, but because the very air does not wish to remember that someone passed. The underworld is not a place of fire, not a place of punishment. It is stillness. It is the soft breath between two heartbeats. It is the color behind closed eyes. And Heracles was told to enter it, not to die, not to vanish, but to return with its guardian, Cerberus, the final labor. He had walked every kind of road by now, through forests, over deserts, across snow and river and salt. He had faced lions and birds and men and monsters, but never silence like this. He stood at the edge of a cave near Taenarum, a windless mouth in the face of the rock, where the land curved downward and the birds stopped flying overhead. No one met him here. No voices called out behind. Even the gods watched from a distance. He did not carry sword or shield, only the pelt of the lion, the memory of dust, the scent of river and ash. The descent was not steep, but constant. The light faded not in darkness, but in tone. Shadows became walls. The air cooled not like night, but like time forgetting warmth. He passed stones smooth from ages of nothingness. He passed pools where no reflection lived. He passed silence that was not absence, it was presence. He reached a wide corridor where no torch burned, yet every shape was visible. There he saw figures. They did not speak, they stood. Some turned toward him, others did not. He did not speak to them. He knew who they were, not names, but lives. Mothers, shepherds, sailors, the ones who wait. Further still, the river. Not wide, not deep, but endless. A boat waited. No coin was asked. Charon looked at him not with question, but with knowledge. He stepped aboard. The water moved, not like current, like thought, like the movement of someone shifting in a dream. The other shore came without approach. It simply became. The hall of Hades was not stone, not gold. It was shape, memory carved into space. Persephone stood near the edge, her hands folded, her eyes the color of frozen pomegranate seeds. She did not ask what he wanted. She already knew. "You seek the dog?" she said. He nodded. "You may take him," said Hades, appearing beside her like a second shadow. "If you can carry him, without blade, without whip." Heracles bowed and went. Cerberus was not hiding. He stood beyond a gate made of breath and old words, his 3 heads watching 3 different directions. One growled, one watched, one yawned. He was large, but not grotesque. His fur was thick, not from cold, but from years of lying on stone. Chains wrapped around his chest, not fastened, just present, like jewelry on memory. Heracles stepped forward. The beast turned all 3 heads toward him. No roar, only breath. Heracles raised his hands, stepped closer, and waited. He did not rush. He sat, long, still, breathing in rhythm with the dog. 1 hour, then 2. Then slowly, the dog stepped forward, not tamed, not beaten, only curious. Heracles rose. He gripped the chain. It was heavy, cold, old. He did not pull. He turned, and the dog followed, not silent, but steady. The return was slower. The boat accepted both of them. The river made no sound. The dead stepped aside, and when they emerged into the light once more, it was morning. Not bright, not loud, but enough. He brought Cerberus to the surface, to Tyrans, to Eurystheus. The king did not step close, did not touch the chain, did not speak, only nodded. And Heracles led the dog back to the gate, back to the deep, and the earth closed again. The labor was done, but Heracles did not celebrate. He walked out into the open fields, where the wind moved again. He sat beneath an olive tree and rested, not because he was tired, but because the world had grown quiet, and he had learned to listen.